It is 10:47 on a Tuesday morning. You are in a conference room on the fourth floor with 11 other people and a slide deck that has been running for 22 minutes. The presenter's name is Brandon. He is explaining Q3 pipeline targets using a chart that could have been an email. You have a legal pad in front of you with 3 lines of notes and a coffee that has gone cold. Your badge says your name and your title. Your car in the garage is a 2019 Honda Accord with 74,000 miles and a small dent above the rear wheel, well that you have not fixed. You are wearing the same kind of shirt you wore last Tuesday. Your phone buzzes against the table. You turn it face down before you look at it. Brandon does not notice. You wait 40 seconds. You tilt the screen toward you just enough. It is your area manager, Darnell. The message reads, tunnel conveyor belt making a grinding noise at location 4. Vendor says Thursday earliest. Do I approve the emergency call out? You type back 2 words under the table. Approve it. Then you set the phone down and look at Brandon's chart. Nobody in this room knows what just happened. Your coworker Priya is sitting 2 seats to your left. She got lunch from the taco cart yesterday and spent 4 minutes deliberating between the $8 bowl and the $6 one. She chose the $6 one and mentioned it afterward. She drives a lease Civic and takes 2 weeks of PTO a year, which she has described more than once as the max she can realistically afford. She is smart and competent and has no idea that the person next to her just authorized a several $100 emergency maintenance call out without looking up from a legal pad. This is a normal morning for you. Marcus, on your right, mentioned your car last month. He said it casually, the way people do when they are not quite making fun of you. He said, still rocking the Accord, huh? And you said, yeah, it runs fine, and that was the end of it. You did not explain anything. There was nothing to explain. The car runs fine. The talk in this office about money follows a specific pattern. Paychecks come up after raises. Budgets come up before long weekends. Someone mentions rent going up and 4 people nod with the specific exhaustion of people who understand exactly what that means. You nod too. You are not performing poverty. You are simply not performing wealth either. There is nothing visible to perform. Here's what exists inside your head while Brandon moves to the next slide. You own 8 car washes. They are spread across a single metro area in 4 different corridors. 3 are full-service express tunnels. 4 are self-serve and automatic hybrid sites. 1 is a flex-serve location you acquired 14 months ago from an owner who was tired and priced to exit. Each location has a manager. Each manager has a number. Each number goes to you. Last month, those 8 locations processed enough memberships and single-wash revenue that after you paid your managers, your attendants, your chemical vendors, your equipment loans, your insurance, your software subscriptions, your merchant processing fees, and your reserves for the equipment failures you know are coming because they always come, the money that landed in accounts with your name on them was $134,000. That is 1 month. That is not a typo. Annualized across the portfolio, after everything, you take home somewhere around $1.6 million a year. You are sitting in this conference room because you have chosen to be here. The W-2 income is real. The job is real. The reason you have not quit is partly because the health insurance is good, partly because the structure keeps you connected to a world that does not revolve around pumps and payment terminals, and partly because leaving would require explaining something you have decided you are not ready to explain. The social math of revealing this does not work in your favor. You have run it. If coworkers knew, the dynamic would shift in ways that would make the office worse for you and not better for them. If certain family members knew the full number, the conversations would change in a direction you do not want them to change. So you keep the badge on. You go to the stand-ups. You respond to the Slack messages. You eat lunch in the break room and you listen to Marcus talk about his car payment and you say nothing that is untrue. What you actually manage, from this phone, from this chair, from a small desk in a back bedroom on weekend mornings, is a live system. There are dashboards for each location that update in near real time. Membership churn rates, car counts per hour, average ticket value, chemical consumption per 100 cars. When a card reader goes down, you get a text. When a vacuum station stops pulling, you get a text. When a manager needs approval above their spend threshold, which is $300, you get a text. You got 3 of those last week. You approved 2 and asked a question about the 3rd. The grinding conveyor belt at location 4 will cost somewhere between $800 and $1,200 to fix. It will be fixed by Thursday. The car count will drop slightly on Wednesday. It will recover by the weekend. You know this because it has happened before, at a different location, and you remember how the numbers moved. None of this is glamorous. That is the part that people imagine wrong when they imagine running a business. It is mostly problems arriving in text form and you deciding what to do with them. The question that actually matters, the one worth sitting with, is not how you got rich. It is how you got the first one. Because 8 started as 1 and 1 started as a Tuesday when you were also sitting in a room, except back then, the phone buzz was from your bank, and it was an alert that your balance had dropped below $500. You were not looking for a car wash. You were looking for something that printed cash without requiring you to become a different person. That was the actual search criteria. You had read enough to know that the business mattered less than the model, and the model you were looking for had 3 properties. It had to be recession tolerant. It had to be operationally simple enough to run without you standing in it. And it had to be boring enough that nobody else in your office would ever think to look at it. Car washes passed all 3. You did not start with a vision. You started with a broker listing and a spreadsheet. The listing was for a self-serve and automatic hybrid site in a mid-density corridor. Not glamorous. Not a rebrand opportunity. Not a moonshot. A functioning, cash-flowing wash with 17 years of dirt under its fingernails and an owner who was 63 and wanted to go fishing more than he wanted to manage chemical vendors. That was the asset. That was the entry point. The first number you learned to care about was SDE. Seller's discretionary earnings, the profit left after operating expenses, before the owner pays himself, before debt service, before the story he is telling you about what it could be. You learned to strip the add-backs like someone who has been lied to before, even though you hadn't been yet. Personal vehicle through the business, a relative on payroll 2 days a week, a phone plan folded into utilities. You pulled them out one by one and reran the number with your own assumptions. The listing said the business earned well. After your adjustments, it earned less well, but it earned honestly. Somewhere in the range that, at 3.5 times SDE, made the asking price defensible. You obsessed over car counts the way some people obsess over stock screeners. You asked for POS data going back 3 years. You asked for membership numbers, active versus lapsed, churn rate month over month. You sat in the parking lot across the street on a Wednesday afternoon and a Saturday morning, and you counted cars manually for 90 minutes each time. The numbers lined up, not perfectly. Close enough to trust, but not close enough to get comfortable. The financing was not complicated, but it required learning a language quickly. SBA 7A was the backbone. The government guarantee that makes a lender willing to fund a first-time buyer into a business they have never run before. You put down roughly 10%. That was the entry point. The seller carried a note for a portion of the gap, subordinated behind the SBA loan, deferred for the first 12 months. That structure kept your cash intact and aligned the seller's incentive with your first year of performance. If the numbers had been fabricated, he was the one sitting behind you in line to get paid. That matters. You did not skip due diligence because you were impatient. You skipped nothing. You hired an inspector who specialized in car wash equipment. Not a general commercial inspector. Someone who had crawled through tunnels and knew what a pump manifold looked like when it had 18 months left in it. The conveyor had been serviced. The blowers were original equipment and aging. You negotiated a credit at closing. The water reclaim system was compliant but operating near its efficiency floor. You got documentation. You verified the utility bills independently, not from the seller's summary, from the actual provider statements. High water and chemical costs per car are the first sign that something is either broken or being run carelessly. These numbers were acceptable. You modeled them forward anyway. You also drove the surrounding 2-mile radius and looked for permitted new builds. One competitor had announced a site 3/4 of a mile south. You priced that risk into your underwriting and kept the multiple conservative. The unit economics of the first wash were not exotic. Self-serve bays generated lower revenue per car but ran with almost no labor. Automatics did more volume but needed an attendant and consumed more chemical and more water. You ran the math on both sides of the site. The real lever, the thing that changed the model from decent to durable, was the membership program. Unlimited monthly plans. You looked at the existing membership base, 341 active members, and you thought about what it cost to acquire each of those customers and what it would cost to lose them. Membership revenue smoothed the winter months. It made Monday look like Saturday in the revenue column. It was recurring, predictable, and it compounded as you added members because the marginal cost of one more wash for a member you already had was chemicals and water. That was it. You closed on a Thursday. The wire cleared. The keys changed hands over a conference table in a title company's beige office. The seller shook your hand and you drove to the site and stood in the equipment room alone for about 4 minutes doing nothing in particular. The first 90 days were a diagnostic. You did not blow up what was working. You watched. You built a basic KPI rhythm, cars per day, average ticket, membership count, downtime events. You tracked those numbers every morning before you opened your laptop for your actual job. The bottlenecks appeared on their own. Hours of operation were not aligned with traffic patterns. Pricing on the automatic side had not been touched in 4 years. Signage at the entrance confused the sequence enough that some customers skipped the membership pitch entirely without knowing they had. You fixed the hours first, then the signage, then the pricing, lightly, with enough margin to test elasticity without triggering resistance. You hired one part-time attendant to replace a full-time one. Labor dropped, car count held. By month 3, the wash was running on a rhythm you recognized. Not perfect, better than you found it. The SDE was tracking above the adjusted number you had underwritten. You had not told anyone at work. You went to the quarterly review. You sat where you always sat. Your badge still said the same thing it always said. Nobody knew you had just bought your way into a different future with the same face you wore to every Tuesday meeting. By month 6, the first wash was covering its debt service and paying you something. Not a life-changing number, a number that proved the model. You sat with that proof for exactly long enough to believe it, and then you started looking at listing alerts again. The second acquisition came 14 months after the first. Same methodology. SBA 7, seller note subordinated behind it, an equipment inspector who knew what failing bearings sounded like before they failed. Different site, same corridor, 11 miles north. You had learned one thing from the first wash that no listing had told you. The hardest part of owning one wash is that every problem is your only problem. A blower goes down on a Saturday morning, and your entire operation is that blower. 2 washes doesn't solve that, but 2 washes in the same metro does something quieter. It gives your area manager 2 problems to balance instead of 1 emergency to escalate to you. That was the reason for the metro network. Not geography for its own sake. Shared vendors who now had incentive to answer on Saturday because you were 2 contracts instead of 1. A roaming maintenance technician whose travel time was economical because the sites were close enough to run in sequence. Cross-site membership promotions, a member at the north location whose commute took them past the south one, given a reason to value the membership more because the membership worked at both places. Learning curves that compounded. The process you built for managing chemical inventory at the first site transferred to the second one before the second one was even open. The SOP existed. You just applied it. You did not rush. Year 1 was 1 wash, year 2 was 2, year 3 was still 2, and you used that year to stabilize, rebuild the capex reserve, and pay down enough of the senior debt that a refinance on the first site made structural sense. The refinance freed capital. The freed capital became the equity contribution on wash 3. You were not chasing a giant leap. You were stacking modest, defensible steps that each had to work before the next one was permitted. By year 4 you owned 3. By year 6-8, each one underwritten the same way. SDE stripped clean. Car counts verified manually. Equipment inspected by someone whose opinion cost you money, which meant their opinion was worth something. The real estate question came up differently at different sites. 2 of the 8 you bought the dirt. The locations where the parcel was grandfathered into a commercial corridor that had since tightened its zoning, where a new competitor could not legally replicate the site within a quarter mile because the city would not issue the permit. You bought those parcels because the land itself was a defensive asset. It was expensive. The debt service was heavier. It was worth it on those 2 specific locations because the alternative was a landlord who could eventually decide your stable, cash-flowing business would look better as a stable, cash-flowing business. The other 6 are leases. Some of them are long leases with renewal options you negotiated hard on. None of them are comfortable. A lease is a clock. You know this. Every lease renewal is a moment when your carefully engineered cash flow can be interrupted by someone else's decision. You have modeled what happens if 2 leases go adversarial simultaneously. The answer is not catastrophic. It is painful in a way you could survive. You keep that model current and you keep the capex reserves funded precisely because the lease risk is not theoretical. It is quiet and patient, and it is always there. The structure that holds all of this is not designed to impress anyone. It is designed to be uninteresting to anyone who looks casually. A holdco owns 8 operating entities. Each opco has its own bank account, its own vendor relationships, its own books. The holdco's name is 3 words that describe nothing. Your name does not appear on the door of any car wash in any city. If a coworker ever drove past one of your sites and typed the name into a search engine, they would find a business. They would not find you. That is intentional. It is not evasion. It is architecture. The management layer is lean in a way that required years to build and would take months to rebuild if it failed. One area manager. She knows all 8 sites. She was an operations manager at a regional chain before you hired her, and she understood car wash unit economics before she walked through your first site. She is paid well and she knows exactly why. Beneath her, each site has a lead. The leads work from SOPs that you spend considerable time making specific enough to be followed by someone you have never met. Camera access is remote. You check it when something escalates, not as a habit. Downtime events have a defined escalation path that does not include your cell phone until the second level of response has already been attempted. Weekly scorecard calls cover cars per day, membership count, chemical cost per car, downtime minutes, and one forward-looking item per site. The call takes less time than your commute. The money flows in a sequence that never varies. Debt service first, then payroll and chemicals. Then a contribution to the capex reserve, a percentage of revenue set aside in an account that only pays for equipment and infrastructure. What remains is a distribution, not a guess, not a hope. A number that falls out of a process that was designed before the money arrived. You still show up to work on time. You sit in the same meetings. Your badge still says the same thing, but somewhere between the 9 o'clock calendar invite and the 11 o'clock one, while someone is updating a slide deck and someone else is nodding at it, the machine runs. Cars move through tunnels. Memberships renew automatically. The scorecard populates without your hands on it. You have learned to hold two realities without letting either one show on your face. Here is what can break: the tunnel conveyor on a Saturday in July. Peak volume day of the peak volume month, and the chain slips or a roller bearing seizes and you are down for 4 hours while a line of cars that were about to become revenue turns around and drives to the express tunnel that opened 6 months ago 3 miles north. 4 hours of downtime during a peak Saturday in summer is not an inconvenience. It is approximately 3,200 in lost revenue at a mature site, and it compounds because some of those customers try the competitor and some of them do not come back. Equipment failure is not a risk you hedge away with optimism. It is a scheduled event you have not yet received the date for. The capex reserve exists because of this, not someday. Before you take a distribution, the POS system goes down and you cannot process a credit card. The motor on the vac island burns out on a Tuesday morning and 3 units are dead by noon. The chemical dosing pump runs at 1.4 times its correct rate for 11 days before anyone notices the chemical cost per car number on the weekly scorecard and asks the right question. These are not catastrophes. They are the steady, ordinary cost of owning physical infrastructure, and the operators who talk about car washes as passive income are the ones who have not yet owned a car wash in month 26 when the blower motor that cost $8,400 installed was not in anyone's budget because the budget was built on a version of optimism that deferred maintenance punishes slowly and then all at once. Bad locations are quiet. The traffic counts you pulled were accurate. The daily average was real. What the count did not tell you was that 60% of the volume was commuter pass-through on a pattern that shifted when the highway interchange was reconfigured 2 years after you signed the lease. Or that the new express tunnel 4 miles south was built by a regional chain with a loyalty app and a price point that made your membership math harder. Or that the 3 months of weather that every market in your climate has, the ones where nobody washes a car because the road salt logic has not yet set in, or because it rained for 12 straight days, were modeled too generously in year 1, because you underwrote against the seller's best 8 months. Car counts are your truth serum, not pro forma projections. Not what the broker told you the site could do. The actual cars per day, verified by you or someone working for you, over at least 30 non-consecutive days, across multiple seasons if you can get it. The lease is a clock, and you always know what time it is. A landlord who watched your site mature, watched the membership count grow, watched the line on a Saturday and understood what that line meant, has information at renewal time that they did not have when you signed. The rent reset clause that looked reasonable at signing looks different when the market has moved and the landlord's broker has comps. The option period you did not negotiate tightly enough gives you the right to renew, but not at a rate that preserves your SDE. You can own a great operation and lose the financial model at a lease table. This is not rare. Negotiate the rent escalator cap before you sign. Negotiate the renewal option terms with specificity. If the landlord will not give you protection, underwrite the deal assuming the lease does not renew and ask yourself if the acquisition still makes sense at that price. The key person who knows all 8 sites and understands why the chemical cost at the 3rd location runs slightly higher and how to de-escalate a shift lead who is about to quit on a Friday night. When she leaves, and eventually someone always leaves, the gap is not filled by good intentions. It is filled by documented SOPs that exist before she leaves, cross-training that happened before the vacancy, and a pipeline of capable people who were developed inside the organization because the incentive structure made staying worth it. Single-point failures do not announce themselves, they reveal themselves at the worst possible moment. Your job is to reduce the number of moments where a single person's absence changes the outcome of the week. Now here's the other thing. While all of this is happening, while the lease clocks are running and the equipment is aging and the area manager is handling a Tuesday that will never appear on your calendar, you are somewhere else. You are in a meeting, you're picking up your kids. You are eating lunch at a place that costs $12 and nobody at the table knows that you built something that will generate more money this afternoon than most people make in a week. That is not a performance. It is not a secret you are keeping for dramatic effect. It is what optionality actually feels like from the inside. It feels like ordinary Tuesdays that belong to you in a way that is very difficult to explain to someone who has never had that. You cannot buy that feeling. You can only build the system that produces it, and the system starts with one location. This year, one location. Pick the model first. Touchless, in bay, or express tunnel, and understand the unit economics of each before you look at a single listing. Learn what SDE looks like at a healthy site versus a distressed one, and what the difference costs you at a 3 to 4 times multiple. Build a relationship with an SBA-capable lender before you need the money. Source deals through brokers, off-market outreach, and operators who are tired. Underwrite conservatively, verify car counts yourself, and inspect the equipment before you have a price conversation. Negotiate a seller note behind the SBA debt. Fund the capex reserve before the first distribution leaves the account. One deal done cleanly outperforms 10 deals analyzed indefinitely. Pick the boring asset class. Do the first deal with discipline. Build the weekly system that makes the ownership invisible to everyone who is not you. The machine does not have to look like anything from the outside. It just has to run.